Singing is as natural as the wind in Iranian culture. My father and grandmother would often sing after dinner before birthdays or graduations. These songs were usually prayers or poems asking for light or love or better days. My name is Pirooz. I'm both Iranian and American. I came over to America as a child after the Islamic Revolution. That means I love Scooby-Doo, Star Wars, Rumi, Big Macs, and Ghormeh Sabzi. Ghormeh Sabzi is the most popular food among Iranians. It's a stew made of cilantro, parsley, onions, kidney beans, and small cubes of beef over rice. If an Iranian visits another Iranian's house or restaurant, the true test of how good it is in the Ghormeh Sabzi. Then there's the requisite phone call to my mother. "How was it?" my mother asks, and my reply, "Not as good as yours, Mom." This isn't a lie. It's absolutely true. My mother's food is so good, my life eating anywhere else has been spoiled. This is probably true for any Iranian you meet. It's also why we visit home as often as we can.
Your friend goes today to Buffalo? Today?
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
You made a mistake, right, Aaron? My best friend in high school, Kayvon, was Iranian too. I remember when we saw each other years later in Asia. We were both working there and hadn't been home for a while. I asked him what he wanted to do when he visited, and he said, "Ghormeh and Sabzi." I heard about a Persian restaurant in Itaewon and took him. He ordered the Ghormeh Sabzi right away. I'll never forget his face. As soon as the plate came down, he just sort of grunted and pushed it away. I told my mother about this on the phone and she laughed. "Not as good as mine," she said. This is an Iranian mother's secret weapon. No matter where you are, you'll make it home to avoid situations like this. I wasn't always as proud of my Iranian heritage in America as I am now with Ghormeh Sabzi on my plate during quarantine. The worst was school lunches when I first came over in Indiana. My wardrobe was pretty bad too. It didn't help that my mother put my lunches in a briefcase. But there I was at Ben Franklin Elementary, a young executive in the making. As soon as I pulled out my lunch, the whole table screamed. "What's that smell?" one boy said. "What is that?" another boy said. My mother had made my favorite, Kuku Sabzi. This was basically parsley, cilantro, and green onions dipped in egg and fried. It was so good. My mother put them in little plastic sandwich bags, but they were usually too big for the bags and spilled over, so they weren't perfect ovals, but mashed and sad looking after the journey on the bus and first period in my briefcase. "It looks like garbage," one boy said. "He's eating garbage! He's eating garbage!" another began to sing. Then Mrs. A, the lunchroom monitor, came over. She asked what was going on and then covered her nose. "What is that?" she asked. "Kuku Sabzi," I said. "Koo-Koo what?" Mrs. A said. After the Kuku Sabzi disaster, I begged my mom for normal food. And a lunchbox.
Hello.
Hello, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm recording you.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah, what should I say?
Remember that the story I told you for you?
Mm-hmm.
I do it for you. And then we said that that Nina's boyfriend said Iranians. Hold on, Mom. Let me call you back. Hold on.
Okay.
I wasn't always as proud of my Iranian heritage in America as I am now with Ghormeh Sabzi on my plate during quarantine. The worst was school lunches when I first came over in Indiana. My wardrobe was pretty bad too. It didn't help that my mother put my lunches in a briefcase. I actually liked my briefcase in Kuku Sabzi. It was my dad's old briefcase, and I felt very big carrying it around. I even put my father's graphing paper inside and made stories on them, or drew my version of a space station with a flux capacitor. I really wanted to go to space. That was my dream, to be an astronaut. That was like what my dad did. He was an electrical engineer who always talked about space and electrons and the magical invention of an ant. "Pirooz," he would tell me, "look at this ant. Imagine if I can make this ant. I would be a millionaire. How great is this design, this beautiful world?" Are you looking at me? No. We were on the picnic table by the International Housing Complex at Purdue University. It was night, and he pointed from the ant crawling on the table to the stars above it. "Look at this beautiful world." I looked up at the stars. There were so many. What do you want to be? My father asked. I want to go to space, I said. Good, my dad said. Then study. Since I was 4 years old, I had a training regiment. My father set up a school desk in my room and would put complex word problems there. If I solved them, I could go play. Sometimes I'd be there for 4 or 5 hours. I didn't know I was being trained to be a scientist like him. But Mrs. Ellis didn't give me the same work as everyone else in 2nd grade. She gave me long division and remainders, and books by Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King. You love your teacher, my dad said. The way my dad said it every time I talked about her made me realize years later.
Every day I'm learning something new.
It was probably my dad the whole time who came up with the idea to give me all the extra work and books.
Learning is part of life.
I sit here during quarantine, looking up at the stars, and still dream about going into space sometimes.
But did you like the story?
Yeah, it's nice. It's not bad, it's nice. But that other one was nicer than this one. The one you talk about that knife and camping.
You like that story?
Yeah, that was better. Or a Ghormeh Sabzi.
That
That was nice too. So are you ready for another story?
Okay, tell me.
My mom loves telling stories like a comedian. She has catchphrases like, you won't believe what happened yesterday, and get ready, and my favorite, this is so funny it will make you laugh for 2 hours. And then she'll launch into her story. During quarantine, I've been reading her stories every few days. She always tells me like it is. That was nice, she'll say. And if it's not, I like the other one better. Then she'll try and one-up me with her own story. After I read her the story about my dad and the magical invention of an ant, she gave me her truth again.
Yeah, it's nice. It's not bad, it's nice.
The other story about the knife and camping is better, she said.
You like that story?
Yeah, that was better. Or a Ghormeh Sabzi. That was nice too.
Then it was her turn.
So are you ready for another story?
Okay, tell me.
Just try not to laugh too much.
Just tell the story, I said.
So another story was this. I was always buying every week a lottery ticket. Always I pray to God, please, please, God, give me some money. I can help my children. I can go and buy a house in California, be near them. So even right now, I have a ticket in my pocket. It's 1 month there. I can go check it out in Wagman because of Corona.
Wegmans is a grocery store chain in upstate New York she goes to religiously every week.
So anyway, I was buying this ticket every week. And then 1 week, I think it was the time none of you have the job or something was going on. And so badly, I needed the money. I came to God and I pray and pray and pray all night. I said, God, please, please give me some money. I can help them do this. So then in the morning, I went to Wagman. And then I went and I put my ticket on those little machines they have. You can first check your ticket and then give it to the cashier. Do you remember? Have you seen it?
I had muted myself on the phone call since I was recording, so she'd get upset if she couldn't hear me. Do you hear me? She said. Yeah.
Okay. So I went and I pray, and I said, with the name of God, I put it inside that thing. I put it under that, and suddenly it says, you are the winner. That's it. Because always it says you are the winner, and then on the next to it, it says how much? $2, $10, whatever it is. But
Okay.
this time didn't say how much. It just said, you are the winner. I said, oh my God, really? God, you listen to me. I was just so crazy at that moment. And I said, oh God, thank you, God, thank you. Now I said in my mind, what should I do if I win? Somebody's going to kill me on the way home.
You've got it! You've got the last golden ticket! The kids found the last golden ticket!
Now what should I do? How I check? So I went, good look at this. It was, Pirooz, this is the funniest thing to whoever I said these people laughed for 2 hours. So then I went to the cashier. It was a young girl, around 18, 16 years old. And with my finger, I wish you could see my finger. I show her to come closer with my finger. Do you hear? You know,
yeah.
With
So
your
you were saying whisper. Come here, get close to whisper.
With your point finger, I said, come here, come here. She came close to me. I said, come closer. She came closer, like we were face to face, so close. And then in her ear, I said, I give you my ticket. You go check. And please, please, do not suddenly scream, say, oh, you win. Don't say anything. Quietly come in my ear and say how much. She said, okay. Now I'm watching her. She don't steal my ticket or something. She went behind that thing and she put it in, and I'm looking at her face. She put it in. She came back. She did the same thing to me with finger. She said, come closer. So I came closer, and then she put her mouth near my ear and she said, $2. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
$2. Very, very little, disappear. She didn't say loud. $2. And
She
then
whispered
after
too.
that, yeah. And then she said, what should I do?
Do you want it in quarters?
She said, after that, she said, how much should I do? Oh my gosh. I was shocked. $2. And then I said, okay.
تنها تو دنیا خسته به سوی فردا تنهای تنها تو دنیا.
You remind me next time I tell you another very funny story. Just tell me BB Gun.
BB Gun.
Then remind me which one? BB Gun. Then I tell you that story. Came on and laughed with that 2 hours.
2 hours. Okay.
For 2 hours.
All right, Mom. I love you. I'll talk to you soon.
I love you. All right. Bye. Bye.
Life was quiet in Indiana after we first moved from Iran. Since I spoke more English than my mother, I became her official translator. Mostly we would take taxis to the supermarket and she would tell me what she needed, and I had to get those things and come back to the car. When we got back from shopping, my mother would start cooking. I'd watch Scooby-Doo, and then my mother would scream in Farsi, "Don't watch this scary show, he's going to give you a bad dream."
Pirooz, Scooby-Doo نگاه نکن شب خواب میبینی.
So I'd turn off the TV and run out to play with Maria. Maria was my best friend. She spoke Spanish and would tell me I was her husband and take me to a storage room full of spider webs and ask me to kiss her. "Now say you love me," she would say. "I love you," I'd say. "Now kiss me," she'd say. And I kissed her. Then she'd giggle with her friend Liza that was with her. Then I had to kiss Liza and do the same ritual. "Now kiss her," Maria said. I like kissing, but I also like spider webs. I'd only last so long playing house before I'd start collecting the dead flies and the spider webs for my pet frog. "That's gross," Maria would scream. Then I'd chase her with a dead fly. "I'm going to tell your mom," she said. I stopped running and put the dead fly in my pocket. I was always trying to catch different bugs and feed it to frogs. I'd open their mouths and put in a bug and make them chew. My other friend Zan would help me. If we couldn't find dead flies and spider webs, we usually stepped on bumblebees and tried those. But the frogs never ate them, so we used the bees to make Bumblebee Stew for Maria and Liza. "It's a magical potion," I'd say. "It's not," Liza said. "It is," I said. "Yeah," Zan agreed. As soon as Liza or Maria drank the crushed bumblebees, grass, water, and mud, we'd laugh and scream and sing, "You drank Bumblebee Stew! You drank Bumblebee Stew!" This became a great game, and Maria and Liza would join us in doing it to different people in the complex until it was a group of 10 of us singing. My dad heard us one day and asked to look at the stew. I got scared right away. "This creature has a beautiful design," my dad said. "You know how much to make one of these bees?" $100, I said. No, my dad said. "Maybe 2 million. I figured an ant was harder to make than a bumblebee. I felt bad right away. I stopped making Bumblebee Stew or feeding frogs after that. and played with Zan instead. Zan was Japanese and always drank 7-Up, so we mostly drank 7-Up. One day he said Japan was better than my country. I didn't think that was nice, so I punched him in the face and he cried. I had never hit anyone or made them cry, so I got scared and hid in the bushes at a building next to ours. My father found me and was real upset. "Why you hit Zan?" he asked. I told my dad what happened. And he explained that we had no country because we had come during a revolution, and that we were people of peace, and that I was no better than the mullahs in Iran, and that I had to apologize. Can you see me? Mm-hmm. My dad made me go to where Zan was sitting with his whole family on the picnic benches, eating barbecue and drinking 7-Up. I said sorry and cried. Then Zan said sorry and cried. Then our dads made us hug.
تنهای تنها تنها تو دنیا خسته و دور به سوی فردا تنهای تنها تنها تو دنیا من خسته و دور به سوی فردا.
Okay,
Farsi,
I
say
say
it to me like I'm a little boy.
in Farsi I tell you.
In Farsi, yeah.
Okay,
And then I'm going to try to say it.
okay. اسکوبیدو نگاه نکن. اون وقت شب که بخوابی I forgot
You forgot your
myself.
Farsi?
Yeah. شب که خوابیدی خواب میبینی.
When I first came from Iran to Indiana, my favorite thing was my big wheel. I'd ride it every day from the front of our complex to the far end of the international housing complex at Purdue University. I usually raced my best friend Zan. It was dinner time for him though, so I was going back and forth by myself. While my mother barbecued some shish kebab over a tiny black grill on our front patio. Is it ready yet? My mother had already cooked everything and thrown a cup of water onto the fire to put it out when I pulled up for a third time. Rice is not ready yet, Pirooz, she said in Farsi.
برنج هنوز حاضر نیست. برو بازی کن.
I looked inside the apartment and saw my dad with all his classmates. They were watching TV and talking loudly.
پیروز جان دستتو بشور.
Wash your hand if you come inside, Pirooz, my mother told me. Maman, man میخوام بازی میکنم, I said in Farsi.
برو بازی کن. برو.
I watched my mom through the kitchen window pull the kebabs from the siekhs and step away to the rice with tadig sib zamani in another pot on the stove. Tadig sib zamani was my favorite. She would boil the rice halfway, empty it out, pour some oil on the bottom of the same pot, put slivers of potato on there, and then lay the rice back on top so the potatoes would fry on the bottom and infuse the rice with the smell and slight taste of fried potatoes. Then she'd flip the whole thing over like a cake, add saffron, and I was in heaven. My mom only made potato tadig when we had guests, so I was glad my dad's friends were there, even though they watched the news all the time and I couldn't watch Scooby-Doo. At least I'd eat tadig. I was about to go back on my racing circuit when I noticed the grill was still smoking. I watched the wind blow and rattle the grill, and a few small embers grew bright red, and I got excited. I secretly loved fire, because I loved the Lone Ranger. They were always making smoke signals on that show. I figured I could be just like them. That's when it hit me.
And now on Channel 6, Persian Cowboy.
I ran over to the bushes and pried a stick loose to cook the end of it. I figured I could burn it into an arrow to go with my plastic knife from Sears. I stuck the stick deep into the charcoal and waited. It caught fire pretty quickly. I jumped and flicked the stick against the grill to put it out. When I did that, I noticed a piece of charcoal fly and land in the bushes next to our front door. I got down on my knees and looked for the charcoal, but I couldn't find it. Then Jeremy showed up. He was my other best friend besides Zan. We usually played G.I. Joes or rode our big wheels because he ate dinner later like us. Let's go, Jeremy yelled to me from his big wheel. I got on my big wheel and chased after Jeremy. He was older than me and a foot taller, so he was pretty fast. I figured I could catch him before he got to the end of the sidewalk. I started pushing the pedals so fast that the plastic of the front wheel was having trouble gripping the cement. 10 feet, 5, 2. I was gonna beat Jeremy today. I was even thinking of what to say as I passed him. Then Jeremy stopped and was looking out at the street. Beat you, I said and flew past him. Then I heard it. The blip sound, and then the large roar as 2 fire engines turned the corner to our block and headed straight for our complex. Fire engine, Jeremy yelled. A bunch of other kids who were outside started to scream it too. Fire engine! Fire engine! I had never seen a fire engine or firefighters. I got so excited I thought maybe we could go on top of one. Let's go! I yelled to Jeremy. We headed back as fast as we could. Our eyes were on the fire trucks the whole time as we pedaled faster and faster. The firefighters were rushing out of the truck with hoses and yelling things at each other. Some had red helmets with yellow stripes. Others had black helmets. I wanted a black one. I was pedaling as fast as I could now. The firefighters were right in front of our building, right by the bushes. Then I remembered. The charcoal. I yanked the handle of my brake and put my feet down. I had forgotten all about it. Now it was all my fault. I started getting really scared. The firefighters might take me to jail. Then I got even more scared when I thought about what my dad would do. I almost started crying right there. You coming or what? Jeremy asked, waving his hands in front of my face. I hadn't moved at all. I just watched the firefighters put the fire out. Come on, Jeremy said and rode right near the trucks. I followed him slowly, watching one firefighter yelling things at all the others. He had his hands on his hips and a big mustache. I figured he was the boss. I went over and stood behind him. I was about to tell him what happened when my mother came running up to me, screaming in Farsi, I wanted to tell the firefighter and not my mom what happened because I knew she'd get mad. She started screaming right away. Pirooz, you start the fire. What are you thinking? This is dangerous. Then my mom took me to the head firefighter. I told him what happened and he was very angry. His eyebrows looked like a V, like birds flying in the sky, and he kept pointing to the grill and then me. If I ever catch you playing with fire again, you're gonna be in big trouble, he said. Never, ever, ever play with fire. I didn't like that he was yelling at me. I started crying and told him he was a bad person for yelling. Then my dad came out of the house. I hid behind my mom. The firefighter was talking to my dad. Then my dad came over to me. I started crying and said sorry right away. Pirooz, you cannot play with fire, my dad said. This is dangerous. You could have burned the whole house, all the neighbor. This is their life. People could have got hurt. I'm sorry, I said. You remember the ant? I nodded my head. Think how much a human life is worth. If an ant is 1 million and a bumblebee is 2, how much is human being? Allah, I said, is infinite, Pirooz. Is infinite. My dad shook his head. I felt so ashamed. I ran inside and put my blanket over my head in the living room so no one could see me. I cried and cried. I thought about hurting people and cried again. Then I stopped. My dad was watching TV with his classmates. They were all talking in Farsi and their voices were getting very loud. I peeked out from under the blanket and saw the television. People were on the streets saying things in Farsi. Some of them were saying things like death to Satan and death to America. I didn't really understand. Then my dad's friends left and I went to bed. My mom and dad were talking in Farsi. I tried to listen, but I couldn't understand what they were saying because they were whispering. So I crept to the hallway. Then my mom saw me. Back to bed, quick, she yelled to me in Farsi. I ran to my room and went straight to bed.
Oh, good. You're getting so good. Now you're like a professional actress. I don't even know what to say. You're getting too good. Oh, my God. That's so great.
Yeah. How is the reaction of the people?
They say that I'm okay. They said, you're okay, Pirooz, but your mom is the star.
After the Islamic Revolution, my father couldn't go back to Iran. He had been under the Shah's support for his PhD studies at Purdue University.
No, nothing to do with the Shah. This is part of the Ministry of Higher Education to give a scholarship to best students to come to get the doctorate and come back to the country.
But when the regime changed, so did his support and ability to travel back. Since he wasn't Muslim and he was a scientist, there was the fear he'd be jailed if he returned. He was also of the Baha'i faith, so that made it even harder, since Baha'is had a history of being persecuted in Iran, and it got even worse after the revolution. My mother was Muslim though, and she could travel back and forth freely. She was also deeply homesick and missing her family, so she traveled back for a visit with me when I was 4 years old. As soon as I arrived, my uncle Morteza asked me what I wanted to do. Chi mikhai, Pirooz Jun? He asked me in Farsi. Kentucky Fried Chicken, I said. Chash, my uncle said. Berim. So right from the airport, my first trip back to Iran, we drove to KFC and my uncle bought me a bucket and I started eating a chicken leg right in the car. Khosh mazast, he asked me in Farsi. I nodded my head and gave him a thumbs up and everyone laughed. I loved KFC. I loved it more than Ghormeh Sabzi or Tatik Sib Zamani. I even asked my mom to make it at home just like they did, but it didn't taste the same. Pirooz loves his fried chicken, my mother told everyone in the car.
Pirooz Kentucky Fried Chicken خیلی دوست داره.
I do, I said, and started dancing and humming as I ate my chicken leg. Then, my Uncle Moti took us shopping in the Grand Bazaar. He said he wanted to buy me a gift. Pick whatever you want, he told me. I got excited. I looked around the bazaar. There were stalls everywhere, and the vendors were calling out to the people walking on the street between them. Do you see anything you like? Moti asked me. I noticed a bunch of golden cages by the side of the road. I figured it might be puppies and I ran over. Oh, Mama, I said, chicks! The cages were filled with dozens of baby chicks. They were chirping and running back and forth over the newspaper print beneath them. Is this what you want, Pirooz Jun? Moti asked. I nodded my head and pointed at a chick close to my hand. She was so beautiful. Pirooz, we're not staying here. My mother explained. We can't get this cheek. I was confused. Why wouldn't we stay? من خیلی دوست دارم این جوجو کوچولو رو, I said in Farsi. برم بخر این جوجو کوچولو رو. من اینو میخوام. من دوستش دارم. I had the chick now in my hands, holding it up to them. Then what Prince Pirooz wants, he gets, my Uncle Moti said with a laugh. Mortezar! My mother shouted. In kheli kasife, my grandmother said and shook her head. Moti already had a small golden cage in his hands. He walked it over to me and I gently opened the tiny door in the front and let my beloved into the cage. Man kheli dost daram, I told the chick. Kheli. Khub, my uncle said. We got back to the apartment and I put the cage on the floor right next to me. I was sitting there with my great-grandmother Khanjun, waiting for dinner to be served. There was already some sabzi and radishes on the table. Khanjun had her tea in front of her, and my mother had given me a small helping of plain yogurt in a bowl. I was eating my most, yogurt, with a spoon and humming and dancing again, looking at my beloved chick, when I started thinking about how hot it was that day. Maman! I yelled to my mom in the kitchen in Farsi. Juje man teshna shod. He's thirsty, my mom said, peeking from the hallway. Come and get water. I ran and got a tiny glass for my mother and placed it in the cage and waited. Then my beloved came over and pecked at the glass and drank. See, I said to my great-grandmother Khanjun next to me. Barakallah, Khanjun smiled. Good job. I nodded and agreed with her. Then I remembered all the chicks eating birdseed in the cages. But my Uncle Moti didn't buy any. My chick might die. I had to help her. She was mine and I had to take care of her now. That's when it hit me. I took the spoon, still in my mouth, scooped a tiny bit of moss on the end of it, and slowly stuck it through the front door of the cage and put it right up to the chick's mouth. She started eating right away and I laughed out loud and looked over at my great-grandmother. She smiled and nodded her head. Barakallah, Pirooz Jun, she said. Barakallah. I was still feeding the chick when my grandmother saw what I was doing from the kitchen. She screamed right away. This is dirty. In kheli kasife, she told me in Farsi. Don't feed it yogurt. Behesh mas nade. It's hungry, I said. Your spoon is not for chicks, she said. Your grandmother is right, my mother agreed. They were being so mean. They didn't understand. My chick was my life. I had to take care of her now. She liked yogurt. If I didn't feed her, she'd die. She needs to eat, I said. We need to take back this chick, my grandmother said in a half whisper to my mom and uncle. That's it! My great-grandmother shouted very loudly, and everyone got quiet. I was even a little scared. Let him do what he wants, she said and smiled down at me. Let him feed his chick. Man kheli dost daram juju kuchulu, I told her. Midunam, she said. Midunam. Then everyone sat down to eat. I wasn't hungry anymore though. I had to take care of my beloved. So I made sure to sit very close to Khanjun so I could feed her all through dinner.
تنهای تنها تنها تو دنیا من خسته و دور.
Okay, no problem. So at the end of the episode now, you watched the episode. Did you like it? Did you like the episode there?
Yes, I like it.
That's all you're going to say? Anything else?
Which episode was it? Which episode? The one you made with Mom?
Yes, yeah.
Because you have many episodes. This is about Julia Hoshkele.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Did you
think
like
if
it?
you put Julia Hoshkele, everybody's going to laugh so much.
After 6 months in Iran with my mother, we came back home to West Lafayette. I was glad to see Jeremy again. We mostly played G.I. Joes, but that summer everyone started getting these other toys that had to do with space. I mostly played with Jeremy because he had the best of these space toys. A Millennium Falcon. This is Han Solo's ship, Jeremy explained. I nodded, but I still didn't understand. Since I had just come from Iran, I had only been speaking Farsi, so I was having trouble understanding English. It can shoot lasers, he said. Then Jeremy pressed a button to demonstrate its laser sound. See, he told me, laser. See? I was in front of my mother about 10 minutes after Jeremy's incredible lecture, mimicking him word for word with an imaginary ship where my hands were. Here's the laser, I said. Nah, خیلی گرونه. Vali, I said and stopped. I never argued with my mother when she said something was too expensive. I just ran back out to where Jeremy was still sitting. He looked up at me right away when I ran up to him. I felt bad, but I told him anyway. She said no, I told him. That's okay, Jeremy said and patted me on the back. You can play with mine whenever you want. That made me cry a little, and I wiped my tears with the back of my sleeve so he couldn't see. Then I played with Jeremy some more until his mom made him go home early. He had to get some kind of operation. I asked my dad about it when he came home. There is extra skin, my dad explained. The doctor cut this off. This is it. He cuts it, I said. Is it going to hurt? They give him medicine, my dad reassured me. I didn't really understand why someone was cutting Jeremy's mangaloo. But my dad continued explaining like the scientist he was. This is a simple procedure, Pirooz, he said. You have it too. Someone cut me, I said. When you were born? Yeah, they cut it. I went home after that and was very worried I'd never see Jeremy again. I looked at the poster in my room. It was of a mother and a baby deer in a field of grass and yellow flowers. On the bottom of the poster was a quote in cursive that said, This is a good poster, my dad had told me when he put it up in my room. You like this poster. I stood on my bed and pet the baby deer with my finger. You understand this meaning, Pirooz? My dad said. You'd see this mother deer. It lets the baby go. Then the baby come back. Why did the mother let it go? Because it loves her, my dad said. I was very confused. I would never let the baby deer go if I loved it. If I loved it, then it would love me. I wouldn't need to let it go. It could just stay with me. I explained that to my dad, but my dad didn't like my reasoning. I don't like this reasoning, he told me. If you say something, you have to give a good reason, Pirooz. You have to use the facts. Then I laid down for bed. Since my dad was already there, I asked him to tell me a story. Oram gese begu baba junam, I said in Farsi. This was my favorite part of the day. I loved my dad's stories. Some of them were taken from the Shahnameh, an epic written by the Persian national poet Ferdowsi. The ones about Rostam and Sohrab were the best. My father would tell me how Rostam, this great wrestler, would beat everyone. Then he had a son, Sohrab, but he didn't know he did.
Sohrab didn't know his father, and Rostam was unaware of he had a son by Princess Tamina.
Then one day, my dad said, Sohrab wrestled his father. And Rostam killed him. But when Rostam looked at the chain around Sohrab's neck, he sees, oh my God, this is his son. And he cried and cried and cried.
And Rostam just didn't know what to do. It was the most tragedy of his life. And this is the most tragedy in Shahnameh for those.
That was one of my favorite stories. I would ask my dad to tell it every night. But the night of Jeremy's operation, I asked him to tell me about his best friend Jenabi in military high school. My dad would tell me how him and Jenabi and a couple of their other friends brushed each other's teeth in a circle.
Let's brush, instead of brushing our teeth ourselves, let someone else. I brush your teeth, you brush my teeth. It was so funny.
Or my favorite, when they would actually move each other's beds on the front lawn of the school where they met every morning for exercises.
When that guy sounded the trumpet, this guy jumped his bed. He didn't know where he is. He was laughing and laughing. It was so funny.
Usually when my dad told stories about Jenabi or his friends from school, he'd get sad and say, I don't know where those times went. I don't know if Jenabi is alive after this. This became a word for the Islamic Revolution, the regime, Khomeini, and all the catastrophes that happened after 1979 in Iran. Then my dad would wipe his eyes with his sleeve, like I did with Jeremy. I'd hug him after that. I don't know why this Khomeini guy hurt my dad's friend, but every time I'd see his picture on TV in America, I'd get worried he'd hurt my mom and dad too. I would pray to my poster with the mother and baby deer for Iran. Sometimes I would ask for a Superman cape, or to help my dad's friends, or to help anyone who was sad. Sometimes I would ask for Rostam, the wrestler from Shahnameh, to save Iran from Khomeini and all the mullahs. Sometimes I would look at the poster of the mother and baby deer and wonder if Iran would ever come back to me. That night, after my dad's story about Jenabi, I prayed that Jeremy would be okay. Please, God, I said, I don't need a Millennium Falcon. I just want Jeremy to come back to me. Then I lied down and fell asleep, dreaming of an Iran that would come back to me one day.
Rustam, like his father, was very strong from very early childhood. Rustam became the champion of wrestling in his youth and a legendary hero in Iran. He had one of the most magnificent horses. His horse name was Rash. He was victorious in all his battles, but in his last battle, he faced with the greatest tragedy of his life. Rustam also defended Samangan many times, and Tahmine, princess of Samangan, fell in love with Rustam.
After episode 7 aired, my dad called me to talk about it. He had several criticisms.
What do you think?
First, he wanted me to do an entire episode of him telling a story from Shahnameh, Ferdowsi's epic. Pirooz, I think what you need to do is just one episode of Shahnameh. Then he wanted me to switch the Islamic Republic flag with an earlier one. And finally, he preferred I didn't talk about circumcision when I mentioned something as great as Rostam and the Shahnameh. I sent my mother every version of the episode, and her response was always the same. He's very nice. And then she said, I hope Khomeini doesn't come after you. Since I rarely shy away from the controversial,
This is our conclusion of what would happen if the South had won during the Civil War.
she also asked me to stop going to all these protests where I might get COVID. You have to be careful, boy. Then I got a call from Aaron, my cinematographer, who was convinced the country was changing. Look at Mitt Romney.
My faith is at the heart of who I am.
Even he's protesting, and he was always against Black Lives Matter. Aaron even suggested I release my film, Sometimes I Dream in Farsi, sooner than later. Your film is examining racist systems. That's being broadly discussed now and will be for the foreseeable future, he said. I walked to the Erewhon grocery store on the corner where only a week before I was met with tear gas and rubber bullets. I thought about the mother and baby deer from episode 7. How the quote said, if you love something, let it go. And how my dad had texted me again that morning to let me know it wasn't deer on the poster, but horses. The if you love quote goes with the horse, my dad said. If you love your horse, let it go. Now I imagine horses in the place of my memory of the deer. I could see myself in Delaware at 9 years old in 1984. The same year I was refused a haircut because I was Iranian. And later, sitting on the floor of our living room, watching the Olympics. That was when I met my greatest hero. Greater than the Lone Ranger or Tonto. Greater even than Rostam. And that was Jesse Owens. When we first came over from Iran, we never ate meals at a table. My mother would put down a tablecloth and we'd all sit around it in the living room. This was the normal way to eat in Iran. First, my mother would put down some bread, herbs, feta cheese, and radishes. This was your basic appetizer. Then we usually have rice with khoresht, a stew made of various vegetables that we'd pour over rice. My favorite stew when I was young was Ghormeh Sabzi, but as I got older, I switched from herbs with kidney beans and Ghormeh Sabzi to khoresht badamjun. Khoresht badamjun was a stew made of water, onions, tomato paste, eggplant, and chicken. I could eat 3 bowls in one sitting. Every couple hours, my dad, brothers, and I would take turns going back for seconds and thirds. It was like Thanksgiving dinner every day. If we ever got takeout, it was a special treat reserved for Saturdays or after a soccer match or some sporting event. The place we went to religiously in Delaware was Captain D's. It was a fast food seafood place. We'd usually all get the same thing: fish, chips, coleslaw, and hush puppies. I'd be in heaven on the living room floor eating Captain D's and watching television. On one Saturday in 1984, the Olympics were on.
Lipton iced tea mix with NutraSweet.
And we were watching a documentary on Jesse Owens in between events.
Gold medals in the 100-meter dash, the 200-meter dash.
I had never heard of Jesse Owens, but my dad explained how great he was along with the documentary. He is a great runner, Pirooz, he told me. He won every event in front of Hitler in 1936 Olympic before World War. Really, I said. He is the greatest athlete, my dad said and paused as we watched him now racing horses on the television. He raced horses, I said? Why? I don't understand. This is a crazy world, my dad said and got quiet. Then the documentary went back to Jesse Owens winning the 4x4 relay race. This was my dad's favorite Olympic event. And he got up on his knees off the floor as Jesse Owens sprinted those last 100 yards. Go! 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 My dad said and stood up in the living room. Hushman! My mom shouted and put out her arms to protect our makeshift table on the floor. Food! I stood up with my dad, my eyes never leaving the television screen. As I watched Jesse Owens cross the finish line in front of Hitler, I decided I wanted to be a runner secretly in my mind. I went to the library and got every book I could find on Jesse Owens. I figured if I read enough, I could get fast. Then I started practicing. My dad showed me how to stand in a track meet, crouch down, and I timed myself with my calculator watch. I went running every day with my dad or by myself. Sometimes I'd take a soccer ball, sometimes I'd go without one. Sometimes I wouldn't even run. I'd play basketball or soccer or baseball, but I still felt like Jesse Owens. I knew I had to get ready. I'd have to be disciplined, like my dad said. You have to focus, Pirooz, my dad would say. Whatever you want to do, you have to focus like a laser. I've been making films now for 12 years. Every year, another film. Some took longer. I've been working on Sometimes I Dream in Farsi since 2016, but it's really the only film I've been doing since I started as an adult in 2008. I just didn't know all these movies, all this searching, all this racing would bring me here. It's June 9th, 2020. I'm not sure where America's headed, or Iran, or the rest of the world under pandemic, but I know I need to focus like a laser. I need to get ready to race the horses, and I also need to let them go. This week, the International Documentary Association made Sometimes I Dream in Farsi the documentary feature of the week. You can make a donation at the link in the comments or on my website. This is the end of season 1 of Stories Between Iran and America. We will begin again every Monday at 8 a.m. on June 29th for season 2. Thank you all for your support and donations for the series and for the Sometimes I Dream in Farsi film. I look forward to sharing more stories between Iran and America with all of you.
The night is gone and the land is dark.
Say 1, 2, 3.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
I have been fascinated with the planet Mars. I always wanted to visit Mars. But last night I dreamed that I was in the moon and watching the stars and planets. In my dream, I was mesmerized by the beauty of a blue planet. I fell in love with it, and I was wishing I were there. Suddenly, I heard my father's voice. Pirooz, wake up, wake up. You're late for our trip to Grand Canyon.